The religion which discriminates between two people is partial, and the religion which treats crores of its adherents worse than dogs and criminals and inflicts upon them insufferable disabilities is no religion at all. Religion and slavery are incompatible. There cannot be a more degrading system of social organization than Chaturvarnya. It is the system which deadens, paralyzes, and cripples the people from helpful activity. For centuries, they lived like this, in perpetual penury and social slavery. They were at the bottom, a part of the Hindu social order, and yet they were forced to live away from habitation. The untouchables of India, the pariahs of Hindu society, their humiliation and degradation ordained by Manu, the great lawgiver. There came a man who gave his life to lift them up from the darkness of millennia-old social brutality and injustice, who gave them dignity, self-respect, and a will to fight for their human rights. His decrepit ancestral home at Ambedkar in coastal Kolaba district of Maharashtra and the stark locality and silent tombs of his ancestors at nearby Dapoli may have a story to tell. A story of brutal social exploitation sanctioned by religion and the sacred scripts, of miseries imposed by a perfidious and inhuman social system. Legend has it that a spiritual ancestor blessed Ramji and his wife Bhima that they will bear a son who will brighten the dark horizon of his people. The son, Bhimrao, was thus born on 14th April 1891 in the military colony of Mhau in Madhya Pradesh, his father being a Subedar major in the Indian Army. Though an untouchable, the father was a devout admirer of the famous Saint Kabir and taught his songs to Bhimrao, who was greatly influenced by the humanistic ideals of the medieval secular saint.
जो बिछुड़े हैं प्यारे से भटकते दर बदर फिरते हमारा यार है हम में हमन को इंतजारी क्या कबीरा इश्क का माता ओ कबीरा इश्क का माता दुई को दूर कर दिल से जो चलना राह ना झुक है.
Bhimrao spent his childhood at Dapoli.
हमन सिर बोझ
His family shifted to Satara, where he lost his mother.
जो बिछुड़े हैं प्यारे से.
He was thus brought up under the loving care of his paternal aunt, Mirabai. It is not difficult to imagine how the young Ambedkar's sensitive mind reacted to the treatment the untouchables were given. In school, the teachers were kind and compassionate. One of the Brahmin teachers was fond of young Bhim and was so impressed by his intellect that he lent his own name to the young student. And thus, Bhimrao Ambedkar became Bhimrao Ambedkar. Nevertheless, caste discrimination was galore. The barber would not touch Bhim's hair for fear of being polluted. It was his sister who trimmed his hair. Bhim and his brother were made to sit outside the class on gunny cloth, for they felt their touch would pollute the other high caste students and the teachers. Bhim could not drink water from the common pitcher. Learning Sanskrit was taboo for the untouchables. The orthodox teachers dared not allow young Bhim to learn the language of the Vedas. Later, in the cosmopolitan Elphinstone School at Bombay too, Bhim had to suppress his fervent desire to study Sanskrit and was forced to take Persian instead. Their woes were endless. Once, when young Bhim and his brother set out to go to a nearby village in a bullock cart, the carriage owner threw them out on learning they were untouchables. On the way, no Savarna would serve them water to quench their thirst. Go away, people said, and asked them to drink from a filthy wayside pool. Ambedkar had his first whiff of how even a superior officer, if he is an untouchable, is treated by the lowliest, a sepoy. This learned man, who had earned a doctorate from an American university, could not secure decent accommodation. Thrown out of hotels and even from a Pasi guest house. So humiliating was it out by the high caste staff official of the state that Ambedkar returned to Bombay disgusted. And thus ordained Manu, untouchable, howsoever and venerated he is in stature than the lowest of the caste Hindus, men, women, and infants. A brief stint as a lecturer at Bombay's Sydenham College, and then this unusual young man of learning who had launched a crusade against the system of caste, attracted the attention of Shahu Maharaj of Kolhapur, himself a reformist prince who worked hard to break the hold of Brahmin priests on society and emancipate the downtrodden. It was at this juncture in 1920 that Dr. Ambedkar, under the patronage of Shahu Maharaj, launched a fortnightly to articulate the anguish of his depressed community. The journal was appropriately titled Mookanayak, the Dumb Hero. After all, Dr. Ambedkar was the greatest follower of Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, that outstanding man who championed the cause of women and the depressed in the 19th century. Soon, the prince offered him a scholarship to complete his discontinued studies in London, and Dr. Ambedkar set sail for England in July 1920. While resuming terms at the London School of Economics and Gray's Inn, Ambedkar turned his full attention to general reading, giving a free rein to his avarice for knowledge and books. The British Museum Library, the famous repository of knowledge for centuries, to which many a great man of learning had made a pilgrimage seeking enlightenment, was Dr. Ambedkar's favorite haunt. Ambedkar virtually starved himself to buy books. Because his funds did not amount to much, £8 a month. He lived frugally, hardly spending anything on clothes or transport. He often trudged on foot to different libraries to save money. He completed 2 theses for the London University: Imperial Finance in the Provinces of British India and The Problem of the Rupee. In London, Dr. Ambedkar simultaneously put in terms at the famous Gray's Inn. A man of versatile intellect, Dr. Ambedkar, even as he completed his thesis at the university, was called at the bar, the highest honor any person of his background had achieved till then. And although fully immersed in this academic pursuit, Dr. Ambedkar never for a moment could forget his people back at home. The inhuman plight of the Untouchables was his unending obsession, and he frequently wrote to his wife asking anxious queries. Dear Ramu, I am writing this letter from a distance of 3,000 miles. I know my absence has thrown a very large responsibility on you, but I am sure you will bear it with fortitude. Be sure that our children study hard. Ambedkar, in 1935, he had made a pledge that he would not die a Hindu. 20 years had passed. The obduracy of the Hindu society had frustrated him. His health was failing. It was time to fulfill the pledge. I prefer Buddhism because it teaches pradnya or understanding as against superstition and supernaturalism, karuna or love, and samata or equality. Dr. Ambedkar's embracing Buddhism was an epoch-making event. It shook the Hindu society to its very foundations. Nearly 1 million untouchables accompanied Dr. Ambedkar on his new path. But more important than the numbers, the grand Diksha ceremony symbolized the denouncement of the Hindu caste system and the pernicious practice of untouchability.